Perryman Show right here on TV 33, WHPR, Comcast 20 in Detroit, and on the internet at www.tv33whpr.com. And welcome to our show today, Friday, November 8th, 2013. And good afternoon to you once again. Before we start, I'd like to introduce you to our host today. And we have a guest co-host because Chris is at a conference. And so I will start to my left.
Robert E. Thomas. I'm one of the City of Detroit's Board of Zoning Appeals.
Councilman Rodney Patrick from the City of Highland Park. I thank Ms. Perryman for bringing me in off the bench today to play with the first team.
And I'm Ken Coleman, media and political consultant.
And we're so happy to be here today with you. So we start, as is our tradition, for Ken to tell us what happened historically in African American community on this day.
Well, thank you, Brenda. Appreciate it. On this day, November 8th, in 1892,
Wow.
William Ferguson is elected to the Michigan House of Representatives. William Ferguson holds the distinction of being the first African American to be elected to the state house in Michigan history.
And that, what year was that?
1892.
Oh, wow.
William Ferguson. Actually, he is one of his descendants by dozens of decades, obviously, is former State Senator Buzz Thomas. That is
Oh,
a family
okay.
member of his.
Oh.
Yeah, William Ferguson, born on this day in 1892.
William Ferguson, born on this day in 1892. I wonder how many have there been since? That would be an interesting.
Be an interesting number to sort of research. I'm going to put that. I'm going to do that research, Brenda, and bring it back to us.
Okay, that'll be great. That'll be great. That'll be great. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we start our show, I'd like to remind you that on November 17th, Silver Fox Furs, Mr. Ricky Welch's company right in New Center 1, is having an annual trunk show, which means their furs will be a little cheaper, and you can make a deal. They're ready to make a deal. And on that day, that will be the first book signing of my new book, Mood Swings and Magic Carpet Rides. And it's absolutely free. We're going to have refreshments, and it starts at 3 p.m. The one thing you have to do, however, is RSVP, and RSVP to 313-872-4260 or 313-319-2343. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, we have a lot to talk about, but we kind of changed up a little bit because our national topic is going to be on the controversy that surrounds the two football players in the Miami Dolphins. And believe me, we're going to talk about the election too. But on our national news, we're going to talk about this Miami Dolphins controversy where Richie Incognito was accused of calling Jonathan Martin, another football player on the team, a half N-word, harassing him, bullying him, and so forth. And this is something we kind of wanted to discuss because it not only dealt with color, it deals with class too. Another thing is Richie Incognito has been calling him names, and a lot of black players have been saying, well, Incognito, he is not racist or anything like that, but how do you stand by and let someone else call another person, even though Martin he's biracial, let him call him an N-word?
Yeah.
Gentlemen?
Well, it's an explosive issue to be sure, Brenda, and as you pointed out, it does sort of hit all of those classic lines, right? Race, class. I think what's interesting about it, particularly guys, is that, these are, 20-something-year-old millionaires. Mm-hmm. These particular men are offensive linemen, so they're 6 footers, they're 300 pounds, and when you hear the term bullying, you normally associate it with maybe there's a small guy that's being picked on by a bigger guy on the playground. And so it sort of goes at some of the stereotypes, right, and the generalizations. I think it's an important issue for us to talk about.
Yeah.
What do you all think about that? Because, okay, first and foremost, Jonathan Martin, he went to Stanford, which is a very top school. His parents are Harvard graduates. I mean, he did everything right in his life, but why is he being tortured like this?
You know, I don't know. I played high school football. I went to college and played track. Ran track, played football, and I never came across an instance where there was a bully that seriously got away with bullying.
Where did you play?
At the University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and
That was,
Northwestern High School.
okay.
It's a historically black college and university in this nation. But we never came across, big issues dealing with bullying. There would be other teammates there that would actually suppress a lot of that stuff, and it's to the fact that you don't really even see it. Everyone else would have stepped up. Hey man, what are you doing? Well, number one, you would have stepped up and said, hey, what's going on? Yeah, I think you better stop and chill out. But everyone else would have surrounded you and said the same thing.
Yeah, I think what it's forcing all of us to do here in America this week is sort of, get right at it, right? Is there a fine line between what's been known as hazing, that is, and particularly as a culture in professional sports, college sports, where the veterans, if you will, subject the rookies, the younger guys, the new guys on the block on the team, subject them to, a lot of bullying and pressure. Hazing, bullying is the word now, but really traditionally it's been hazing.
Right.
And is that something that should be tolerated in professional sports? We talked a little bit off the air talking about the college experience and the fraternity experience. But those are oftentimes, 18, 19, 20-year-old people. These guys are grown, or at least, certainly biologically. And should this culture be happening in a professional sports locker room? I say no. But there are other people that say, hey, man, these guys got to man up. And why is everybody, these are grown men. They grown, right? Right. What do you think, Rodney?
Well, it was interesting from a coaching perspective. I used to coach in Detroit Public Schools. I used to coach basketball. And I think about the fact that there's no way that this should have gotten out to the point where it is right now. About a month ago, what probably should have happened, the three people involved, the three parties involved, the coaching staff, Mr. Incognito, and Mr. Martin should have sat in the room. And there's enough blame to go around for all three. And what I mean by that is that the coaching staff should have told Mr. Incognito, look, we did tell you to toughen him up. We did want you to give him a little the proverbial kick in the rump just to get yourself going, but you went too far. Then Mr. Incognito should have said, well, maybe I did go too far. I shouldn't have got personal with them. I should have left it on the field or in the practice facility. Then Mr. Martin has some claim on this whole thing because he should never have walked away from his team at that point. The Miami Dolphins, and I don't feel sorry for the Miami Dolphins, but they're at the point now where they have lost their left side of their whole offensive line, which is going to be a detriment to the team for the rest of the season. So all three should have gotten in the room, gotten together, and really calmed this thing down before it got out of hand. This should never have made it to this point.
Incognito has been allowed to say that word in the locker room for a long time. He has assimilated, and that he's been allowed to assimilate.
It hasn't been checked.
He has not been checked
By
about.
anybody, not the management, not the players.
That's
I
crazy.
I got to ask myself, and I'd venture to say, I've been a reporter but never covered sports, so I haven't been in locker rooms, college and professional locker rooms. But I've got to figure that this stuff happens more often than we're hearing. The Miami situation has come to light, but I bet you it's something that a lot of NFL locker rooms have grappled with. And I think I'm glad that it's out here in front and center, because I don't know how you can be a grown black man and allow a white man to call somebody else the N-word. I don't get it. I've never been able to get it.
I don't either.
I think it's a double standard that we have in our community where we can call, each other the N-word and white people can't do it. I don't think any of us should be using it. I
And you
certainly
gotta
don't think
look
somebody
at
white
also the
should.
fact that half the team is black, if not more than half. And,
Probably.
And that's a sad situation to be in which you can't stand up for yourself or your race with another person, a teammate calling you an N-word.
Well, they're saying, Robert, there's some of the black people, and they're talking through, some of the retired sports guys that are on the highlight shows, post and pregame shows, that talking to these players, and they're saying, well, some of the black players are saying, well, Martin isn't black, he's biracial, he went to Stanford, he speaks the King's English, he doesn't speak hip hop vernacular, and so they're saying, Incognito is blacker than Martin.
What is
Let's
it
get
within
right
our-
at it. That's what's happening.
No, seriously, what is it within our culture where it's more acceptable to not use the King's English in some quarters, just like that.
I think it's some subcultures. I don't want to say in our culture itself.
Well, subculture.
That's
It's a
some,
big one.
Well, in this instance, I mean, you can do that in neighborhoods. We got to talking about that earlier, and apparently you do this now on NFL teams or maybe NBA teams. I don't know, but it shouldn't be happening. I'm kind of shocked to see if you hear about it.
Well, I think what Warren Sapp said, and I'm not allowing Warren Sapp to be the voice of many on this issue, but he did mention that during the games, right, during the games, that those words are said on a regular basis to try to get into the heads of some of the black players. Hopefully they can retaliate and then get kicked out of the game. Now, Warren Sapp also mentioned that if Incognito would have came to him after the game was over with in a different setting and said that, well, then that would have been handled a lot differently versus during the football game itself. There's a fine line between trash talking, obviously, getting personal, wanting to, again, getting someone more adept and wanting to play harder and work harder in practice. And then the coaching staff, again, should have stepped in and said, Mr. Incognito, that's a little bit too much. We did want you to help him out, but that's too much. And then Mr. Martin should never have left his brothers on the team.
Well, tell me this. Have any of you ever been bullied?
Probably in middle school.
I was.
Sure.
I was bullied.
Sure.
I was bullied in grade school, and every day I got beat up. I got chased to the playground, and that's when my mother took me out of public school. I was a quiet girl. I was kind of smart then, but I got dumber as the years went on. But anyway, no, I was called teacher's pet, and I was penalized for being kind of bright. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
They chased me out to the playground. Clyde Allen, if you see this show, I might get you. He would beat me up. I mean, every day. But somebody said maybe he just liked you. But I was third grade.
I can say that I've never been bullied like that. I get the closest a situation to come to something similar would be maybe in middle school. But I always stood up for myself. I've never backed down from, I don't care how big or small you were. You weren't about to come up here. Now, I had to sit up here and, in some instances, actually protect some folks being bullied. And they will still try to come at both of us, but you're still not about to bully me around, period.
I get bullied on talk shows.
Clyde
Morris.
Yeah, they did.
Is that why I sit between you guys?
I don't know.
Yeah.
You may
What
want to
about
make
you,
sure you got
Rodney?
to.
I really can't say I gotten bullied. I've always tried to be the voice of reason. Now, I'll say this. I don't have any brothers, so growing up, if I hadn't been playing basketball and just being active, I think that things may have been slightly different. But I was always out there in the neighborhood just with the fellas and just we doing what we do. I think bullying, the term now is different than what it was when I was growing up. I think maybe when we were growing up, I think it's slightly different.
Well, and I think now school boards, cities, the city of Detroit, following the Detroit Public Schools, the city of Detroit a couple of years ago, the city council passed a resolution affirming the Detroit Board of Education's policy of not condoning bullying. Bullying is now the buzzword, really, for giving somebody the business, right? I think the difference here, y'all. I mean, I think we've all kind of been through bullying on the playground.
Well,
the
I
difference
did
is these
pledge.
are well, and pledging sorority and fraternity life. But these are. I mean, the reason why we're talking about this is because number one, it's millionaires. It's a professional football, and it has the race and class piece too, which are really sexy, obviously, from a news perspective. And that's why we're talking about this, and not what's probably going on right now, Rodney, at a high school or a PAL, at a PAL game,
Right.
Police Athletic League game right now on Friday.
And some parents, in those little league things, there's some parents who actually encourage the bullying.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a whole different culture in and of itself. Well, it'll be interesting, guys, to see how this plays out. I think we better get into the election results, though, right now. And everybody, we were talking off camera. Some people have some feelings about certain things, but we'll start with the mayoral election, where Mike Duggan won by 10 percentage points. 74,254, 55% of the vote to 60,448.
Well, first, I want to point out that about 6 months ago on this broadcast, I predicted that Mike Duggan would be the next mayor of the city of Detroit. Had to point that out.
I was watching that.
You were watching
Okay,
it.
Swami.
Swami was, but a couple quick observations. I mean, obviously, the race was finished a little bit tighter than I think a lot of us expected. Benny Napoleon loses by 10 percentage points and only 14,000 votes. I was looking inside the numbers overnight and saw that Mike Duggan did incredibly well, guys, in absentee votes compared to Mike Duggan did much better in absentee votes than Benny Napoleon. And, I've always sort of made the argument that absentee votes, councilmen, are about 30 or 40% of the total vote oftentimes. Yeah. I think that's where elections are won and lost, and I think that's where Mike Duggan won this contest. What do you think?
I agree with you on that. I think I had a bitter taste in my mouth about this whole process, only because from a campaigning standpoint, I always want to take my opponent and go out there and get my message across and beat my opponent. I don't want to have him thrown off the ballot. I don't want to win by default. I don't want to hear the excuses. Campaign hard, organize yourself, raise the money, get your message out there. Don't try to build yourself up by tearing his accomplishments down or lack of thereof or whatever the case may be. Go out there and beat him. And then in this particular case, because there was a slight tinge of race, go out there and beat him.
Slight.
Well, I don't live in Detroit.
Councilman is being diplomatic.
I don't live in Detroit, so I may not have gotten the whole thing.
I think race took a bigger part of this than it should have, but it worked for Benny Napoleon, I think. I mean, because some people, I heard.
Mike Duggan?
No, I think this is going to be
I'm
interesting.
saying it worked for Benny Napoleon because I heard I listened to radio shows and I watched TV 33, and it seemed to say, let's fear the white man. Mm-hmm. I think it was a fear of the white man. The white man get in office, you're going to lose all your rights, you won't have any power, you won't have this, that, and the other thing, and people got fearful.
I didn't get that part.
I did. You should have watched what I watched. You should have
What I
heard
did see was Napoleon was hammering about saying that big business is going to take over Detroit. Your neighborhood's not going to be taken care of. Big businesses, you're going to see more and more business coming in Midtown, downtown, which I say is going to come anyway. And neighborhood's going to lose out on this conversation.
That was another thing, yes.
I've said it before on this broadcast. I think the Benny Napoleon campaign was anemic, certainly through the primary. It reminded me much of Gil Hill in 2001 for mayor. I think they rested on the fact that he was the hometown favorite. The whole phrase, Detroit is my home, not my hobby. They rested on it throughout the campaign. I think the race did get tighter for a couple different reasons. One, you're right. I mean, Napoleon, or at least the super PAC that was supporting Napoleon, went negative and attempted to try to define Mike Duggan. But Mike Duggan had defined himself 6 months before. Right. I mean, here's a very telling point. Sheriff Napoleon has had almost 40 years' experience in law enforcement in this community. Yet it took till he didn't release his cop plan until September the 10th, well after the primary, and really, quite frankly, after a lot of people had already made a decision about who they were going to vote for. The Napoleon campaign got a little better the last several weeks of the campaign, but by then I think they had lost it.
Yeah, and I want to iterate that I think both campaigns went negative.
That last week, that parking space.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
it was Benny Napoleon's.
It
was his job.
How many guys
he made
did he
the
have
decisions.
guarding the parking?
Several.
According to the commercial.
Sure.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying that.
But yet Benny, he did not look like he wanted it enough, and he looked, I mean, you saw the guys going out there canvassing. He had his leather jacket on, just smooth and suave, shaking hands. Hey, how's it going? And quite frankly, Duggan was beating down doors, having neighborhood meetings.
250
He started a
250
year ago.
neighborhood home
parties.
I mean, it was something crazy.
Yeah, we say in PR a lot, one of the things you can help yourself with, particularly if you're a candidate that doesn't have a lot of money, is what's called earned media. How do you use your accomplishments to get yourself ink in newspapers and get yourself on the news? The narrative that Mike Duggan created, and it started a calendar year ago, back when Benny Napoleon was helping the Michigan Democratic Party get Barack Obama elected. Mm-hmm. While Napoleon was doing that, Mike was knocking on doors and talking to people in their living rooms, and it created created, I think, two things. One, for those people, it was a trust factor. Wow, if the white guy's going to come meet me on 7 Mile and Dean, or on Mack and Bewick, or on 23 and Dragoon, you know, he must be an all right guy. And that legend continued to build. And so every time you saw Mike in the media, it'd say, well, you know, I just did my 25th House meeting. I just did my 50th House meeting. I just did my 100th House meeting. And that earned him a lot of credibility. It earned him media. And then when the paid campaign started, I mean, you know, obviously he had a 5-to-1 funding advantage, and he smoked Napoleon.
Yeah. Even when it comes to emails he sent out, you know, the ads everywhere, albeit radio, television, he beat them down. Plus the fact that only less than 25% of the people turned out to vote. So.
But yet, all that we just said, Napoleon only lost by 14,000 votes, tremendously outspent. But in the grand scheme of things, Councilman, 14,000 votes in a city that, you know, is as big as it is, could very well have been a hurdle that Napoleon, had he run a stronger campaign earlier, it could have overcome. I saw a lot of his supporters on Facebook on Tuesday frantically running around trying to get polls covered. I can't believe that a major campaign like his had trouble covering polls on Election Day. He had the UAW backing him. He had AFSCME back. This is Napoleon. AFSCME backing him. Fannie Lou Hamer backing him. When I run for office, if you get the Fannie Lou Hamer endorsement, they've got the top 100 polls covered for you. It was an anemic campaign to start. It got a little bit better, but Mike Duggan just outworked the guy.
And this is what I meant by organizationally. This was your time to step up, break through all the doubt. If the campaign or the election would have been maybe December, maybe that 14,000 would have shrank down to 7, or maybe even a different outcome. Who knows? But this was your opportunity to step up, to break through all those doubters out there that are not quite sure whether you could handle the job or not, because you're the next man up. And it didn't happen. And I'm disappointed about that. I'm disappointed that it should have been a lot closer. It should have been most certainly a race that was based upon the issues, and all the discussion should have been based on issues, because we most certainly have Detroit and Highland Park and Hamtramck have some major league issues coming around the corner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Goodness. Well, the thing about it was Mike Duggan was everywhere. I told you I went to a party in the hood. There he was. He was there at the hood. He was playing the records. No, he was not records. Did I say records? Okay.
DJ Duggan?
All right, I'm a baby boomer.
Putting 8 tracks.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
I said records. That was what before 8 tracks. Anyway. So it's interesting, too, with the fact that you remember Crystal Crittenden came over to Benny Napoleon's side, so she probably brought a lot of her people, too.
I mean, let's be candid. I mean, you know, Crystal Crittenden, I think she got, maybe 5,000 or 6,000 votes. Yeah, I mean, it certainly helped Napoleon. I don't think it hurt him. But again, I really think, y'all, the race was really over by the primary. I think that Mike had resonated with enough people, and it was almost like, you know, he didn't play pre-vet defense. His campaign continued to work. But Napoleon was able to chip at the lead, but he was so far behind. It was a wrap. And a lot of the men and women in the Napoleon campaign I've worked with on other campaigns, they're skilled guys and gals. But I think if the candidate doesn't want it, and he's not giving off the energy, you know, I think that's telling. And I think people saw that. They saw it in the community. They saw it on TV. Well, first of all, he's got a job. He's the Wayne County Sheriff. And so, you know.
Do you think that made it more difficult for him to run?
Well, Mike quit his job. And so Mike had more time to get out there and beat the pavement. But he's the hometown guy. I mean, I think Napoleon could have won the race. They just ran a terrible campaign.
Okay, let's go to city clerk. Incumbent Janice Winfrey, she won 91,595. 72% to 35,263 for Dieta Wilcoxon, 28%.
Yeah, I think, Ken, you called that one too. It was a blowout when it came to that, that vote.
Well, both newspapers backed Winfrey.
Yeah.
Well, but if you read the Free Press's
I did
endorsement,
read
it was the most backhanded endorsement I've ever read. I mean, once you read it, you almost kind of looked to see didn't I see Will Coxon's name in bold and not Winfrey? I mean, Winfrey certainly could have been beat had there been a candidate that had better financing.
Yeah.
And I actually think Ms. Will Coxon actually was good on some of the issues that she raised, but didn't have the money to do things like, a significant absentee mailing, have organization to cover the polls. We saw 8 years ago, incumbents can get beat. I mean, Winfrey beat Jackie Curry, so it can happen, but you've got to have organization.
I want to add that one missing element Benny did not, and I want to revert back a little bit and I'll bring it back here. Actually, Benny and Deetta Wilcoxon, they had no young folks at all under the age of 40 go along with their campaigns. I've seen all of the 40 and under with Duggan, and of course with Winfrey, but I did not see anyone under 40. Was maybe about 2 or 3 people that I knew personally. Outside of that,
Well, I mean, Duggan clearly had Brian Barnhill, the wonderkind, the 27-year-old wonderkind campaign manager. He was one of my students at Detroit Public Schools.
He had
I
more
got to
than
say,
that,
congratulations.
actually. You said it
He did,
times.
but I guess the point I'm making is, I know I have to keep pointing that out. I might need something, but I think the point I'm making, Robert, is, I mean, that was he had. I think Mike did a better job of putting those people out visibly. There's no
Well,
question about that.
Just to kind of go back and piggyback on that, I had both of the candidates on separate shows on my morning show, and it was much simpler for me to get Mike Duggan than it was for me to get Benny Napoleon. Now, that should never have happened. All I did was I wrote Brian, and he sent me to John Roach. John Roach got me right back to me, wherein I had to go through many, many changes that I will not talk about here to get Mr. Napoleon on my show.
That speaks volumes. It does.
for his hometown, it speaks a lot of volumes there.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely.
So yeah, that kind of, I was kind of dismayed at that. I just didn't think I should have to, or anybody should have to go through that many changes, Okay, but back to the city clerk. I just want to get on that real quick, because you said something that was interesting. You talked about money. When you run for an office, don't you kind of forecast how much money you might need, especially if you're running against an incumbent, Ken or Rodney?
Yeah, I think so. I'll do this quick. I mean, I think not only do you do that, but you also size up who are the likely opponents and see where they might be and how you might be able to counteract that quickly. And I'll get off of this. I think that most people generally accepted a calendar year ago that Mike Duggan was going to raise a whole lot of money. Having said that, if you were challenging Mike Duggan, you had to do some things that didn't take money, and particularly if you were a hometown guy or gal. I mean, I think there were things that you could do to try to counteract that. Again, he only lost by 14,000 votes.
Right. Out of all these elections that took place this week, you need 3 things. You need a viable candidate, you need organization, and you need money. If you have 2 of those 3 things, you really stand a good chance to win.
Right, I agree with you.
Money, most certainly, it should be one of the options. But if you have a great organization, that could take maybe a weaker candidate and still pull that person over the top.
I want to add that, I believe Deetta Wilcoxon was kicked off the ballot for a good certain amount of time, too.
It wasn't a long time. It was before the primary.
Yeah, it was before the primary, but she was off the ballot. And if you're off the ballot, you're not going to be able to raise money because no one's out there
Take you serious.
going to take you seriously
That's
to raise money.
But what she was masterful at is creating earned media from those challenges.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
she got some of the more prominent news stories on Miss Wilcoxon was, her challenges in getting on the ballot, or her challenges in challenging, the actions of the city clerk. I think she did a brilliant job of sort of using the media to try to advance her visibility, because she wasn't a heavily financed candidate. But again, it's organization too.
Yeah.
I mean, there are lots of variables that go.
Okay, let's look at the at-large race in City Council, Brenda Jones and Santel Jenkins.
Well, in my view, no real surprise there. Incumbents almost never lose in Detroit. unless your name is Lonnie Bates or Martha Reeves or Monica Conyers.
Yes.
So it wasn't surprising at all that Santel Jenkins and Brenda Jones rose to the top two. What was sort of interesting, not to me, but I think a lot of people are saying they're surprised that Brenda, very slightly obviously, only by a handful of votes to be sure, but Brenda comes out as the top vote getter as opposed to Santel, who's the current city council president. I'm not surprised by it, but some people are.
Well, you got to remember, though, Santil is the council president, but she was selected as council president, not necessarily elected. So we'll see what happens with that.
You know, a lot of people maligned Santel Jenkins too, but she still got a lot of votes.
Yeah, and a lot of folks who love Brenda Jones want to also get David Bullock in there. It's the same types of folks, types of voters, and they were trying to chip away at Santel Jenkins' votes.
Well, you know, here again with Reverend Bullock and Roy McAllister, I think they had some significant funding challenges, certainly as compared to the two sitting council members. You know, running citywide office is no joke. I mean, I had the great fortune of being elected citywide as a charter commission member, but that's a very different race. Running for city council and obviously running for mayor, you've got to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't think that Reverend Bullock and Mr. McAllister were able to do that.
Yeah. I think they would have both probably done better in their own councils versus
Districts.
doing at large.
Yeah.
Oh,
Good
okay,
point.
in their
Districts,
district.
yeah,
That's a very good point.
Okay, District 1, James Tate, an incumbent, against Wanda Hill.
No surprise.
Wasn't much of a race.
No surprise.
It was 2-1, it looks like.
I mean, if you drove through Grandmont Rosedale in May, June, and July, and into the fall, you saw James Tate lawn signs all over the place. Tate was fortunate in that he was the only sitting council member who ran for re-election who lived really in an island unto himself, meaning that there was no real elected competition among, no colleague that lived in the same district he had. When council decided the lines, how the lines were going to be drawn, he had already been holding neighborhood community meetings, district meetings. Tate did a masterful job, I think, in District 1.
It's interesting you say that, though, with the lawn signs. We all know the lawn signs don't vote,
Yep.
but in the races that I've participated in myself for my own campaigns and then the other races that I've participated in, lawn signs can be very intimidating. And to an opponent that sees all these lawn signs out there for the other person, and for voters, it's one of those, well, I might as well just go ahead and vote for that person because they seem to have the most of the lawn signs. Lawn signs are very intimidating.
Their names resonate too.
That's right.
You know, drive down some of the winding roads in North Rosedale Park or the wide lots in Grandmont Rosedale. I mean, if you go through a block, if you go from 6 Mile to Grand River, and you're driving down a street, and you see 20 lawn signs between 6 Mile and Grand River of one candidate, every day when you drive to work, when you're coming back from picking up the kids, and you're undecided, those lawn signs can help you decide.
They do. They really do.
If you have any comments, you could call us at 313-868-0342. Give us a call. Okay, my question, Wanda Hill, who is she? I don't know her.
Wanda Hill, if I'm not mistaken, she's recently retired, but she worked in the Auditor General's office in the city for the city of Detroit. She was a city employee. I think she recently retired. When I saw her, certainly understood city government. I mean, there's no question about that. Here again, I think that particularly for citywide races, and we're seeing even sometimes in district races, incumbents have an incredible advantage. And for all of the challenges, I think that some people throw, all of the darts that I think people throw at city council as an institution, people tend to like their guy or gal. They're like, well, it's the other 8 that I don't like. My guy or gal is okay, right?
Exactly.
And I support them. And in a district race, that's all you need, councilman.
Right.
You just
That's
need
exactly
your
right.
guys. You don't
That's
need
exactly
you don't need somebody on the east side if you're on the west side.
Okay, 2nd District, George Cushenberry Jr. won against Richard Bowers Jr., sorry.
Yeah.
Only by 2,000, less than 2,000 votes, though.
I thought it might be a little bit closer. I'm not surprised that Cush pulled it off. I mean, Cush was the youngest elected member of the State House in the state's history in 1975 when he was elected at 21. Cush has been on ballots in that community for nearly 40 years. Push Cush is a trademark, I think, in Northwest Detroit.
He's a minister now,
He's a
too.
minister. I think he's an attorney as well. I mean, Cush has worked at the State House, for the county commission. He's a known commodity there, and I think Bowers did well to steal a couple of endorsements and finish as close as he did.
Yeah, I agree. That name definitely resonated with the community. Like I said, the county commissioner, state rep, that name just took the day. I mean, and that's another conversation we probably need to have with these recognizable names. That will, that
that's
keeps
one
coming
thing
back.
in Detroit. Name recognition sells in Detroit a lot of times. I'm not saying all the time, but it does sell.
But Ms. Perryman, I don't have a problem with name recognition. The name does sell. But along with that name recognition, you need to have a named accomplishment as well,
Oh, I
or a
agree.
list of them, and that's lacking in some cases.
I agree, because when all else is gone, all you have is your name.
That's it.
So let's go to the 3rd District. Scott Benson, Francine Adams.
Benson had run for state rep 2 years ago in some of that same territory. Fell short, but didn't fall short by much. He was able to earn a couple strong endorsements, got the newspaper endorsements, got the congressional district endorsement. Smart guy, and I think it took him great places. I'm not surprised that he won.
Now, Ken, when he ran a couple years ago for state rep, who did he run against?
Actually, Brian Banks.
Okay.
Brian Banks won.
Now, isn't that interesting?
Yep. The controversial Brian Banks.
Very much so.
Why is he controversial? I've heard that name before.
Because I believe it's due to his
Brian's
situation, right?
Brian's had
Yeah, a few more
a
things.
number of financial situations. He'd written a number of bad checks. Had written some bad checks for lawn signs during the campaign season.
Oh, my goodness.
And some other things as well. But he managed to keep himself in the news, not for his platform and program last summer or 2 summers ago, but about his financial woes.
Oh, I do remember those stories. Yes, I do remember those stories.
I believe another topic came up where he was supposed to be living in one district and
Yes.
actually
Yeah, I
he was
think I
elected
remember
in
that
one district and is living in another district.
Right.
Okay, 4th District, Andre Spivey, incumbent, against Betty Cook Scott.
Yeah. Well, Reverend Spivey certainly is an incumbent and had the benefit of that, although he moved into a new community on the east side. He had been a West Sider, but I think the power of incumbency helped him. Robert would probably say it's because he's a Q, a member of the right fraternity. But and Betty Cook Scott is a former state rep, so she's been elected and part of that community too. So it was challenging. In fact, the margin of victory for Reverend Spivey was much smaller than his colleague James Tate or his other colleagues Brenda Jones and Santel Jenkins.
Okay, let's go to the 5th District. Mary Sheffield, Adam Ollier.
This was a total shocker for me.
Mary Sheffield won.
Mary Sheffield won at the age of 26. Now, Adam was not too much older. I believe he's
28.
28.
28.
Just turned 28. And I actually thought Adam was going to pull this one off. But in this instance, once again, I believe the Sheffield name actually resonated with the people.
It was a shocker for me as well.
Yeah.
I believe the name helped out, and this was a name not of an incumbent, but just a name that's synonymous with the city of Detroit. And I'm surprised Adam was not able to break through that.
And another part to that is, and I don't want
No,
to
go
cut
right
you off,
ahead.
but another part to that was Adam. He knows intricate details of how city council works. He knew a lot of the stuff that was going on with the city.
Well, see, did you hear Mary talk? I mean,
I've heard her talk before.
How many times?
Several times here on this show, not necessarily tabletop. But
I had her on my morning show.
And several engagements out in my district, which is the 5th district, and I've heard her speak.
Well, I think Mary is 26. I think she's a much stronger candidate than she was a couple of years ago when she ran for state rep. I live in the district. I live in District 5 and saw both Mary and Adam active in the community. Even got door knocks from Adam. I'm not terribly surprised. Here's what it comes down to. I wrote about this morning on Facebook and talked about it on Brenda's earlier show. Absentee ballots are very important, and getting out to seniors and early voters are very important. Both candidates did well, but I think what separated the two was Mary Sheffield gets an absentee mailer from the UAW. Adam gets an absentee mailer paid for by the Chamber of Commerce. Now only real voters that kind of read into these things would really know that. But when you get a mailer and it has the UAW emblem and it says Sheffield on it, particularly for a lot of those senior buildings along Shane and in Elmwood Park, that says something. And I think Mary was able to, I think that helped Mary a lot. We'll read more into the numbers and see where their votes actually were. But Adam did work very hard. He is the liaison to City Council. You probably could argue that he might know, City Council better than some of the other candidates, to be sure. And he's very young, so I think the future is very bright for Adam, whatever he does after this. In any event, we have the youngest member of City Council in the city's history, whether Adam won or Mary won, and Mary is the winner.
Okay, the 6th district, Raquel Constaneda Lopez. She defeated Isaac Robinson.
Yeah. Again, I live in District 5. I don't live in that district, but I was very proud as a former Charter Revision Commission member. It was my motion at the table that called for the hybrid structure, the 7 districts and 2 at large. And part of the feeling that I had behind that motion and what people said to me when I was serving is they wanted an opportunity for people to have a chance to win elections that lived in their communities. And we hadn't had a Latino member of the City Council in the city's history. We hadn't even had a member a city council that lived in 48217 or 48216. Nobody's ever represented, ever been at the table at city council from that community. I'm glad that it happened. I'm happy for Ms. Lopez. I don't know her personally, but I think it's it's really the hallmark, if you will, of the hybrid at-large district structure.
Okay, the 7th district, Gabe Leland defeated John Bennett only by 50 votes. And I believe that's going into a recount.
Yes.
Here's the interesting thing about this. Certainly Burton Leland, Gabe Leland won the race. But actually on election day, at the poll vote, John Bennett actually got 500 more votes than Gabe Leland, but he lost the race. Why? Because Gabe got 600 AV votes, and it overtook the 500 vote advantage that John Bennett had at the polls. It is a great case study, Councilman, and the importance of absentee voting and reaching out to those men and women who vote early. And here's another thing, and I'll get off of this. They're not all seniors now. More and more people, younger people, are voting AV. Because they go out of town, they may be working the polls, they may be just disposed. But, Gabe Leland, we'll have to have a recount, but Gabe Leland actually won this race at the AV level and not at the polls on election day.
And that speaks to organization.
Yeah.
Right,
Definitely.
right. Now let's quickly go through the police commissions because we have a lot of other things to discuss. We have in the 4th district, Willie Bell defeated Henry Williams Jr. Oh, yes?
No, I was getting ready to say I don't have the pleasure of knowing either one of them. It's one of the things about the police commission races. I mean, a lot of folks, some folks I did know, but oftentimes I did not know them.
Okay, in the 5th district, Willie Burton defeated Marcellus Bryce.
I thought Marcellus might pull that off. I do know Marcellus, and he actually did a couple door knocks.
He's
in my community.
run before, hasn't he?
I think he actually has run before, and I think he might have run for state rep in the last cycle. Might be mistaken.
Okay, in District 7, we have Ricardo Moore defeated Tawana Morris.
Not surprised in that one, Ricardo
That's
Moore.
all I have there.
Yeah, he's a former communication specialist with the Detroit Police Department.
Okay, I'm just going to deviate from our run of show for a second because, Rodney, you have an announcement about the old Ford plant, or what is it?
Well, yeah, thank you, Ms. Perryman. Last night, we had a public comment session at Highland Park City Hall. The room was full. I most certainly appreciate Highland Parkers and everyone else coming out. The Woodward Avenue Action Association is the nonprofit that really wants to engage and rehab Woodward Avenue, all 27 miles from downtown all the way out to Pontiac. So if you've seen those cylinders in Ferndale, the one we have at Highland Park, there's one in Pontiac, there's one in Royal Oak. Well, that's part of the Woodward Avenue Action Association. So they are very interested. We're pushing forward in rehabbing a portion of the Highland Park Ford site, the Henry Ford plant, where the Model T was built. And so since 2007, I've been with this group. We've been working very hard, very diligent at trying to get this done. And we made it to the point last night where we actually could have a presentation. The Michigan State Historic Preservation Office came down. Quinn Evans, the private firm that actually helping out with the case study, they were involved, and we had a great presentation to Harlem Parkers. And again, the room was full. Everyone was satisfied. A bit of good news amidst the confusion and challenges that we have in the city of Highland Park.
That's great.
So whatever happened after the Lansing visit, did you all get any results of that?
We did get some results from that, and because I don't want to take up too much time on the show, Ms. Perriman, I'm inviting and encouraging everyone to come on out tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock at Nandi's Knowledge Cafe on Woodward Avenue. From 10 to 11, I'm going to go over everything that was discussed in Lansing, the 4 options that the state has given us, and where we stand right now as it pertains to emergency financial management.
It's great.
Okay, I encourage everyone to go. Knowledge is power. Find out what's happening. Keep abreast of it. Okay,
Good stuff.
I wanted to speak with Robert real quick because, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, last week's show, Robert was out of town and we talked. Robert is in law school, and when he was a classmate of Tiana, how do you pronounce it?
TNA Brown.
Tiana Brown, the young lady who was found murdered last week in her car, the law student. And I was just wanting to ask you quickly, her funeral's tomorrow, right?
Yes, the visitation is today and from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. at the James H. Cole Hope for Funerals in Northwest
Home for
Chapel.
Funeral.
Home for Funerals. And that's off 16100 Schaefer Highway.
At Puritan.
Okay. And the funeral's tomorrow at 11 a.m. at Oasis Hope Christian Church at 933 West 7 Mile Road here in Detroit, Michigan.
So how are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm maintaining. Like I said before on the radio, when I was in Boston, she was supposed to be in Boston with me. It was a program that she helped started to do a intellectual property transaction negotiation competition. And I had no interest in it, but she, we're the only 2 African Americans, and it's going into the patent law field, period, at the law school. She came in with me in 2010, and, she's a part-time, I was a combined law student, and she was set to graduate in 2014. Wow. I was going to walk with her. I'll be done next month, but I was going to walk with that class. So, yeah, it's a tough time, and the campus atmosphere, of course, is more visibility as far as police cadets and officers in that area. But it's run a shock to the whole campus in the Midtown area. Period.
Yes, and I taught a class down at Wayne State last Monday night, and I talked to the women there, and they're more fearful.
Yeah.
Too. And they were walking in pairs. They used the term scary, and they said a lot of people try to save money by parking over near Mathi, which is the physical ed building. And it's over near the Lodge Freeway. It runs up and down there, and there have been sexual assaults over there and everything because that is a little ways from campus,
And it goes to show also, not just walking along, but the city lighting is an issue, especially.
Yes.
And Wayne State University, and they tell you before they had a press conference with us at the law school, say, hey, we can't maintain the city lights for the city, even on the university campus.
Wayne
It's not
State
there.
purchases.
Wayne State
Purchases the lighting from the city of Detroit.
Yeah, and they can't do anything until you have a couple of lights out in those areas, and it runs a danger for the students.
Well, I stood out there on Cass waiting for my son-in-law, and I was in pitch dark. In front on Cass, it was dark because he had made a wrong turn, and so I was waiting out there a little longer than I expected. I said, God, it's so dark out here. It really, really was. So, well, our sympathies go out to so many people in Detroit right now. Speaking of that barbershop shooting made national news the other night, and a relative of the Perryman family was one of the people murdered in that.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
And yes, very, very, very sad. A 40-year-old man. I did not know him, but he is a relative of the Perrymans, nephew of my former father-in-law, great nephew.
Well, we talked about it, and first of all, certainly we have your family, extended family in our prayers, Brenda. But it brings home something that we all talked about last week. It really is time out for the violence, and we are going to have to help the law enforcement. The police aren't going to be able to do it by themselves, and so it's going to take oftentimes, I think, Robert and Councilman Strong brothers like ourselves to get with with other brothers of goodwill, the Malik Shabazes, and actually Pastor Orvella has been doing a phenomenal job over the years. They don't come out and cover her, when she's doing crime marches, but they'll go out and cover everything else. But we've got to really roll up our sleeves and get out there and challenge these people.
This morning, 3 people were killed in a home invasion. I mean, it is happening execution style, and it's happening so often. It's like, well, the police chief called it urban terrorism, it seems like. But people shouldn't have to live like that.
I agree.
It's like the inmates are taking over the asylum. I was hearing about this man. Well, I know about this man. He's about late 50s, early 60s. These old gangsters from Detroit, and he said he's packing up his guns and leaving town. I mean, this kind of, he said this kind of stuff is just beyond the pale.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and particularly how these things are happening right now with the barber shop. The guy went in there.
It's no fear.
No, not at
No
all.
fear.
I didn't care who was looking. These guys are doing this stuff out in the open.
Well, they shoot
now.
cops now. I mean, so they'll shoot us. They shoot men and women in police uniforms that carry Glocks.
And things
they
going to
no
have
fear.
to start to happen. I mean, this stuff is reaching national attention right now.
Right. Well, I just want to agree with what Ken was saying about the neighborhoods, the residents becoming more involved.
Yeah.
I think about the time where I was teaching my 5th grade class, and we would have a student or two that would constantly get in trouble, constantly have issues. We had to call home or suspend or have some kind of in-school punishment or whatever the case may be. And so I would go to that student at the end of the day and say, listen, you're trying it your way, and it's not working. It's not working your way. So why don't you give me a day? Then we'll turn it into 2 days and 3 days of trying it our way. So what I want to say to the residents, try it the police way. Get involved. Don't just sit back and not say anything. Whatever you saw, be very observant and then be very vocal about it by letting the police know what you saw.
Yeah.
You could solve this. You could help them solve this. They're on your side because they want to solve it as well.
Indeed.
Well, I think a lot of criminals think that they just aren't going to get caught.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it too.
And that could change. That could change
I
with
think it can
cooperation.
change.
Yeah.
And people are afraid to drop a dime. Well, phone calls a little more than a dime.
And I think that's, you hit the nail on the head when it comes to that topic. People are not coming up front. They see things, they know things, they hear things on the street within their cousins or whatnot, and they still won't say anything. And these folks are taking lives, plural.
And there have been people who have gotten shot who won't say who shot them.
That's what I mean. They're
fear
doing
of
it their way.
retaliation.
It's not working out. So try it the other way.
I hear you.
Right. Well, let's kind of go on an upbeat note. To end the program, the Tigers have a new coach. What do you think?
Yeah, Brad
Walker
Osmus.
Osmus,
Has never coached at the major league
I
level.
don't understand that choice.
Well, I think the argument is to use an analogy from another professional sport, he's a good X's and O's guy. He's an Ivy League. He has an Ivy League education, I think, from Dartmouth. He's supposed to be a really smart guy. I remember him as a player. He wasn't a superstar type player. But they often say that catchers, the position of catcher, the guys that play that position make for good coaches. They see the whole game. They help call the game for the pitcher. They can see the whole field literally. And some of your better managers now and in the past have been guys that have been catchers. So we'll see what happens. Lloyd McClendon didn't get the gig, but fortunately for Lloyd, he got the call from the Seattle Mariners. The hitting coach of the Tigers, the African-American hitting coach for the Tigers, Lloyd McClendon, didn't get it. These guys, they have a great team on paper. They've got to play. See, here's what I think the manager can't do. He can't hit for you in October. He can't catch the ball for you in October. We've got a great lineup. Guys just have to be what their resumes say they are.
Wow. I had never thought about that, but the catcher does see the whole field. He watches the whole game.
Some catchers call the game.
Yeah.
Help call the game.
When they're going between their legs.
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
Well, Wow, that's interesting. That is so interesting. Well, I hope the Tigers have a better season next year, but I just thought Boston wanted it a lot more than the Tigers.
Their big guys hit, Big Poppy.
No, and you know, you have a couple of players who just didn't show up for the game. Namely, Fielder, didn't contribute all that well.
Yeah,
during
they've
the
been
playoffs.
dogging him out.
You have a couple of players out there that didn't, your big hitters you expect to come up there and perform. They did not perform at all.
Wow. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're at the end of the fastest hour in television, nationally, internationally, or whatever. I'd like to thank you once again, Rodney Patrick, for sitting in today.
Good to
for
see you,
Chris.
Councilman.
Also, I'd like to thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
And of course, Ken, you did double duty today. I really appreciate
I love
that.
hanging out with you today.
And you're going to get Gary Peters for me.
In fact, I talked to his press secretary yesterday. We're going to get a December date for you.
Okay, that's for sure.
I'm on
if
record.
Not, we could do January.
You know, my predictions,
December's almost gone. We
I'm
can
good
get
with my
January.
predictions.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Have a great weekend and be safe, please.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Coach.